Don't get us wrong, we're extremely thankful that Nintendo released Game Boy games on the Nintendo Switch console itself. However, with the rate of Nintendo releasing these originals and the stockpile we still have at home, we thought there had to be a better solution. So we had a thought, is there a way we could integrate old retro cartridges into a Nintendo Switch? The first idea that came to mind was a console utilising a larger screen, so the DSi XL was the first choice. We then set about sourcing an aftermarket shell and grinding out the tabs that weren't necessary to fit the extremely large DSi XL motherboard. Partway through the build, we were extremely lucky to cross paths with an upcoming electrical engineer who was able to create us an adapter that modified the DSi XL screen to fit with a Nintendo DS Lite motherboard. So we scrapped the DSi XL motherboard idea and went straight for the DS Lite motherboard. The first part of the build obviously involved removing the DS Lite motherboard and also creating custom mounts to ensure that the motherboard fit correctly. We recycled some mounts from a Game Boy Advance SP shell. We also created a Game Boy Advance cartridge slot and recycled a heavy-duty battery from a DSi XL unit. We also mounted the speakers and USB-C charging port. Once happy with the fitment and basic electronics, we then set our task on the DS Lite cartridge slot. However, it was becoming evident that it wouldn't fit within the shell's parameters, so we had to come up with a solution. The first thing that came to mind was stripping down the R4 cartridge slot down to its basic PCB form, and then soldering it directly to the DS Lite cartridge slot. We then initiated a simple boot to ensure that the R4 flash cartridge functioned properly. The next part of the build process involved wiring the audio. We first started by connecting the speakers, followed by the volume slider. For this build, we had no interest in including the ear jack, so the port was removed and bridged. As we were using DS Lite Internals, we couldn't give up the opportunity to play DS Lite cartridges, so the firmware was upgraded and a tactile button would be added for screen swapping capabilities. The next part of the build, and one of the more difficult aspects, were the buttons. The far rear trigger buttons on the console would be blanked in, and only the top trigger buttons would be used. And after negative feedback from our last builds using analog sticks, this time they would only be for aesthetic purposes. As always, we would try to recycle as many parts as possible. So in this instance, we used the directional keypad from a DS Lite motherboard. For this build, we used ultrafine 36 AWG wiring. And with limited space within the DS Lite shell, we had to use superfine 2mm tactile buttons for the left and right trigger buttons. With the wiring now complete, we set our focus on mounting the original 4.2-inch backlit screen to the Switch Lite glass screen bezel. Less than an inch of blank space protruded on each side, so to solve this problem, we used some black vinyl for the edges, which was later trimmed down around the screen bezel to create a neat finish. To ensure that the screen fit in such a confined space, the original steel shielding around the LCD screen would have to be removed. This would give us the extra millimeters needed to close the shell. Finally, the last part of the build involved using double-sided tape to fasten the LCD screen in place, followed by screwing the shell together. If you're enjoying this video, now's the perfect time to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. After several months of building and planning, the Game Boy Switch is finally completed. The console features the original Game Boy Advance cartridge slot, as well as the DS Lite R4 flash cartridge. We use DSi XL speakers, which are mounted in the rear, as well as a USB-C charging port in its original location. For a clean finish, the volume and power buttons are mounted in their original locations. Soft touch tactile buttons were used for the front trigger buttons, while the rear trigger buttons were blanked out. Due to previous unfavourable feedback, the analog sticks are now purely aesthetic. The R4 flash cartridge runs off Ace 3DS and is packed with all your favourite retro emulators. The negative key has now been blanked out, while the positive key enables screen swapping capabilities. The bottom square key is the select button, while the round home button is the start button. With the firmware upgraded, the console now has a quick boot process. However, retains all the capability of the DS Lite console, including screen swapping capability, so that you can enjoy all your favourite DS Lite games on the single screen. AV out can also be added to this console in the future if required. You may be asking yourself, why would we go to all this effort to create this console? Well, there are several reasons. Firstly, we enjoy showcasing our custom work and pushing the boundaries of what's capable using Game Boy Advance or DS Lite Internals. Secondly, while we appreciate Nintendo releasing Game Boy games for the Nintendo Switch, there are still limited titles, and with the plethora of games still available in our workshop, we thought, what a perfect opportunity to create a one-off console. With the addition of the larger DSi XL battery pack, the console has now 20% more battery life than the original DS Lite. And did we mention, as well as playing all your classic Game Boy Advance titles, the console is also capable of playing all your favourite NES titles, such as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 1, 2 and 3, Double Dragon, Super Mario Bros. And Zelda, just to name a few. And of course, this console wouldn't be complete without playing all your favourite Super Nintendo titles. And we couldn't forget where it all started with the original Game Boy series. Overall, we're extremely pleased with how this console came out and have decided to keep it in our own personal collection. After a lot of trial and error and many cracked LCD screens, the hard work has finally paid off and we feel like we've created the ultimate Game Boy Switch. And would we do it all again? Possibly, but next time with prefabricated directional pads. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to check out our others. And while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Stay safe.